want to start by making a new document here. So File, New, and then you've got this screen that pops up. Okay, if you go into Preset, International Paper, that will give you an A4 portrait picture. But for me and my particular style that I'm going with, I'm going to make it landscape. So if I change the numbers around to 297 for the width and 210, that will still be an A4 sheet, but it's now going to be landscape instead of portrait. So if I press OK, there we have my new document. So already I've got my green screen person here. You'll go on to explain the two reasons or two different ways you can crop, which is crop in that way, okay, which is just highlight over the picture and you can crop the whole thing, okay, or you can use cropping using the magnetic rectangular marquee tool, which basically means you can just cut around the outside of something, or a shape around the outside of a picture. It doesn't have to be a circle, you could also go for a square, it could also be a circle, whatever you fancy, okay? In this instance, I'm just going to use the rectangular one. And then if I copy that, so Command C, or just edit copy, and then I paste that onto my document, okay? You can see it's way too large because I'm going to need to put some text there and things like that, so she's going to be too massive for my poster. So if I press Command and T, or I go Transform, and then Scale, okay, but Command and T is better. If you hold Shift, you can then make the image smaller. So I'm going to make it like about that big. Okay, so she's going to be walking along. Okay, and that's basically how you would do that. That's what you do for the first couple of steps. But you go into about history, about how you would adjust things, and etc. and things like that. Now what I want to do is show you about the different ways we can cut this person out. Okay. There is the magnetic lasso tool, which is probably the most difficult one of all, but I would only recommend you using it if every other option fails, okay? So I'm going to do that one first anyway. So imagine there's no other way to do it, you're going to have to use this tool. You click where you first want it to start, and then you just drag along next to the picture. Now at the moment, because it's a quite clean picture here, it's not having much problems cutting it out, okay? However, something like this hair might be more difficult. It's going to cut a lot of it out. Okay. Now I'm making this look easy because I've had about 10 years experience on Photoshop. But for you guys, it's not going to be the same. So you need to be really careful when you're using this tool. So my top tips are, when you've got it to cling to something that you want it to go to, so I'll restate that. Say once you've started it and you're noticing it's going a little bit haywire, I would bring it back next to the picture and press click once to make a little square where you want it to be. I'd make every so often little squares as you're going along. See, because I'm more experienced, I've got a lot more training on when I know it's going to go wrong. Despite that, sometimes even the best of us have issues where what it thinks it's clinging to is right. So to get back to the start, if you just double click anywhere on the image, it will undo the selection that you've got, okay? But make sure that you only press it twice, because if you press it more than that, it will go haywire. So my top advice is every so often, or every little bit, just make a little square, clicking once, so that it's saving the progress point of your magnetic lasso. Okay? You can cut it out like this and then rub it out. That might be an easier way to do it, okay? But first of all, I want to show you some different tools about what you could do in this situation, okay? So the next tool I want to show you is the quick selection tool, okay? Where you just click on a bit of the picture and keep dragging it around, and it will drag around what it thinks it needs to pick up on what you're trying to cut out. Okay. In this instance, because I've got a green screen background, it's easily picked out the background. However, we've got a little bit of an incident with the leg here. So say if I was to copy and paste that, okay, that shows me that that leg hasn't been picked up. Okay. So the tool does have its issues. Alright. So there's another problem with that kind of particular tool. It doesn't always need to sort of somewhat work. Okay, so you have to be really, really careful when using it. Another alternative is the magic wand. Okay, so you just click on it once, and then hold Shift to click on as many areas as you want to, and it will select stuff. You can see it's got a line here basically on the picture. That's easier to rub out. So say I was happy with that, because that's pretty good. I then can go Control and click on the image. Oh, yeah. Sometimes it will do that as well. Control and click, and then I want to select inverse. And what that means is it's selecting the opposite of what is being selected at the moment. So at the moment the green is being selected, and we will obviously want to select the image of the girl. So if we press select inverse, then the girl is being selected. So we can copy and paste that, and then suddenly we have a picture of the girl and not so much to rub out. Okay. The last way that I'm going to teach you of how to get rid of the green, get rid of a green screen background, is to go select and then colour range. What this allows you to do is it will give you a sample pen to click on. So we want to click on the green, obviously, and we want to try and get as much of a silhouette as we can going here without losing obviously any of the picture in the image. So that's a pretty good image. Okay, so what it's doing is it's trying to select all the green that's in that image, and if I press OK, that has made the perfect cutout, so that if I go select inverse, copy and paste, you will be able to see that it's pretty much spot on. Okay, so either way was going to have that line, and then I just get my rubber tool, and then I can rub it out basically and make amendments. Okay, and that is several ways of how you can cut out stuff on cut out an image on Photoshop. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Okay, I can now play around with that image in terms of the colour adjustments. Okay, so if I go to Image Adjustments, I can first of all play around with the colour, the brightness and contrast. So I can make it more contrasted and less bright if I want to. Okay, I can play around with the levels, which is exactly the same thing, where I'm changing the amount of light in the image in terms of black and white. That's being seen there, or the amount of colour, the RGB colour in that image. Okay, or I can play around with colour balance, okay, which is about the tone of colour in the image. Okay, so in other words, in the mid-tones at the moment, okay, there seems to be quite a little bit of yellow. If I adjust that and I wanted to make it more red, say, I can add it to, bring it to more red, add a little bit more yellow, so we're kind of getting almost like a sepia kind of desert feel. So bright climate, and I can do that with any of the different, or if I wanted to make it look more like a zombie, I could make it a bit more green perhaps. So it's about playing with the different colour tones depending on the place where she's situated. To save time, I've sped up this video where I am cutting out the background and posting it on where my character is and resizing it so that they look the same. Using all the tools that I've taught you so far about transform, okay, and using the marquee tool to set it up so it's ready to go. So say I wanted to adjust the background for instance, and I want to make it quite dark and gloomy but quite contrasted. Yeah, as you can see at the moment, there's a big contrast about how she looks compared to the background image. And that's what we're kind of playing around with here. Is making sure that we're playing around with settings that they best suit what we want. So say that I was happy with my background to be like that, okay? She's way too bright for that situation, so we're definitely going to have to decrease the exposure in that image. Okay, so even that already looks much better than what it was before. Okay, and then we can play with the brightness and contrast. So say I wanted to make her look less bright and perhaps a little bit less contrasted as well. in this instance. So she's actually looking more like she's there. So it's about playing with all those different options. You could make it black and white if you wanted to. Okay. Or you could sort of desaturate both the images. So if I go to desaturate, okay, so that's black and white. That's not what I was looking for. What was I looking for? Hue and saturation. If I desaturate it, so it's not completely lost its colour, but it's less coloured than it was. And I can do that with the image as well. So go to hue and saturation. Okay, so it looks more like a kind of zombie film, basically. But you can see here that this isn't a great image because it's starting to pixelate and she's very much in focus there. But it gives you some ideas of what you need to do for that part of the poster, playing around with the image and adjustment settings. Okay, you can also play around with them down here in this instance. Okay, so you can also access them that way, so you could posterize it, which makes it look like that. Horrible. You can invert it so it looks a little bit like that. They're all the same kind of effects down here, okay, in image layers. The other thing you can play around with is the actual filters that Photoshop has. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to play around with the artistic settings and do colour pencil. So what it will do is it will open a whole gallery of different filter effects. I'm going to make it smaller over here so I can actually see what it would look like on screen as a full image. And it will also take a little while because it's actually adding kind of special effects to your image for you. So if it's taken a long time, don't be surprised. But you can see there already it's started to put some kind of special effect that wasn't on there, so it looks a bit more painted there. Or, you know, you could go for really obscure, have rough pastels. I don't really see the difference of that. You can make it more cartoon-like. I'm going to go with that because that's quite cool. It looks a bit more comic booky. Okay, and then I could do the same effect. So selecting her layer. I know you can't see that I've just done that, but I've now selected her layer. And then if I want exactly the same filter applied, I could do it like that. Although that looks absolute pants. So what we want to do is find the same effect and go into the menu and adjust her accordingly. So you might want less of a highlight areas, or you might want more highlight in the image to make her fit in. You might want the stroke to be smaller. Make it less intense looking because it's a different picture, and there you go. So that's me just adjusting that and playing around with that, and that looks already quite cool. I'm quite happy with that. The other thing is the status bar down here. So this is telling you about how big the document is, how zoomed in. So that's only like 25% of what it actually is going to be. Bear in mind we're working on that. But you can find out all types of different things. Okay, so the current exposure that it is, the document dimensions, etc. So that's and it allows you to know what kind of state of play it is. So it's going to be a large document basically at the moment, but it's compressing itself. Things like if I wanted to add a gun, I've just opened Chrome, but it's not opening very quickly. So the best advice I'd give you if you're looking for props and stuff is I would try and go for a PNG background. That's a portable network graphic, which is basically means it's a transparent background. The reason being it'll be so much easier for you to not have to chop it out basically. but you know, if you want the practice on doing it, then by all means get something with a background. I'm going to go with this. That will do for my image. And you will know if it's PNG because when you open it up in this size, it will have a series of checkered squares, which it does in Photoshop. So if we go to view image, okay, never drag it from that size, okay, that's because that will be that actual size rather than the full size of what the image is. So in other words, you've seen how much that blows up. This is the real size of the picture. So when you've imported it in, with an object like this, you probably don't want to use colour range. The reason being is that it's not going to be able to pick up on what the background is because essentially there is no background. I'll prove my point to you by going into select and colour range, and you'll be able to see that it won't be able to highlight what the distinguishable colour is, as you can see there. Even if I press the background, it can't really figure out what is the background and what isn't. It just reads it as the same. So colour range is not good in this instance. It's also not going to be good if you've got a picture that is, say, of a blue flower and it's a blue sunshine in the blue sky in the background. That's also not going to work because the colour is too similar to pick up on for the computer. So if it's on a transparent background, it's easier to do it basically. So in this instance, I would probably use the magic wand tool because it's dead easy. I just two or three clicks and I'm done basically. Ugh, except for it's taken ages. So if I go click and then hold shift to get that inner part of the gun, and then that's it done. I just got to select inverse, copy it, and then I can paste that to my picture. Okay, and there's my gun. Okay, obviously the gun is absolutely massive, so we're going to need to change that. So if I've got my magnifying glass, I can zoom in, make sure that it's actually zooming in and not zooming out. Okay, and you will see when you get that option, you can see it can either fit to screen if you want it to just go back to how you had it to manipulate it. It's actual pixels, so it can spread out even larger. You can fill the entire screen, okay, or you can do its print size, which again is going to be bigger than Photoshop needs. I'm just going to zoom in to where we can see her hand and the gun, because I'm now going to resize the gun by pressing shift and drag in the corner, and remember it's Command and T to resize. Everything's slower because I'm screen recording. Then I press my arrow tool to say that I'm happy with the transformation and to apply it, otherwise it will just keep transforming it. Okay, it's still a bit big, so I can press Command and T again and keep resizing it. So it's a lifelike size. So probably like that's fine. Now at the moment, it's great, but a gun would want to be pointing the same way as she's walking, basically. So if we go to Edit, Transform, so just like where I told you to manually change how to transform your picture, and you go to Flip Horizontal, that will change it that way. Now if I press Command T again, and I go to the corners, you see these two little arrows and a little curvy circle kind of at the corner of the gun. That means I can rotate my gun to suit where I want it to be. So I'm going to rotate it like so it matches her hand a little bit more. And I'm going to grab it and place it over the top of where her hand is going to be kind of clenching it a little bit higher. It's all about matching how it goes. Yep, that's perfect. Press enter. Now the problem is her hand is underneath the gun. So what we're going to need to do, we hide the gun layer, okay, using the eyeball on the layer menu. we go to the layer that we want to, we're going to copy this hand basically, so we need to select the layer that she's on. I'm going to use the magnetic lasso tool, just because I only want to grab a little bit of it. Okay, so cutting around gently around her hand, hoping it's going to cling to most of it. In this instance, it doesn't matter if it gets a bit of the top of her dress, we can always rub that out afterwards. And then click on the first square that we made on that to then secure the lock-in, or the circle, or the area that we want to select. Press Command and C, Command and V to copy and paste. Okay, then we drag our hand layer above the gun, which we can't still see because it's got its eyeball missing. Okay, we bring back the eye, and suddenly she's holding the gun. Now the problem here, okay, is that she's not holding it very well, because she would be holding it with a hand on the trigger. So I'm going to replace this again. Okay, too far. That's better. Okay, so if I now zoom out, what I did there was go on the magnifying glass. I can either go fit screen, or I can just control and click and fit screen. It's either way is up to you. You're probably going to want to press the button. I'm just used to pressing control and click. And there she's holding her gun. Okay, it's not the best, best of it, so I can then adjust that accordingly, and that looks better. The last thing I want to show you is some text effects. Now there's a strong possibility that this computer is going to crash as soon as I do that. Just to bear in mind that's the case. You click on the T once and it will automatically do the beach ball of death. It always does this because it's having to think of every font that it's got in its kind of dictionary, I guess, of fonts in Photoshop. So don't panic if it starts doing this for a while, or a minute or two. That's normal. If it does it for more than a minute or so, or maybe probably perhaps 2 minutes, then you might want to control and click on the Photoshop logo, and it will tell you if it needs to force quit. Okay, mine's didn't, so I'm not going to show you that right now, but I'll show you that after I've shown you how to do the text. So once it's loaded, it will give you this symbol. Oh, why are you not giving me the symbol now? This kind of text symbol, like that, so that you can then drag from the top left to the bottom right a box to make your text go in. I'm going to make my text smaller just so you can instantly see it. Okay, so bear in mind, if your text is really small, that might be why you can't see it as well. So I would adjust the text size first. Then to make any adjustments, highlight the text first. Obviously that's an awful font and it doesn't go in the background. So if we go up here, we can, which is kind of like your little toolbar, your quick toolbar for the fonts. I'm going to make it dark red font to begin with, and I'm going to press OK. I'm also going to resize it so it's much bigger. So 72 maybe. Okay, that will do for the minute. And then I'm going to change where it is by clicking off that, going to the arrow menu, and then actually physically moving where I want it to be placed. Now it's okay, it's a bit plain though. I think it's a bit boring. So if I want to adjust it further, I can click on the T again, and then click inside the letters to then be able to manipulate that. So I'm going to highlight all my letters, okay, and this is a quick and easy way that you can change the font and actually see the changes being made to it. So highlight everything about the word. Then if you click your cursor in where it says the font name and then press the downwards arrow, you can actually scroll through the fonts much more easily, until you find something appropriate. Okay, I am going to do some touches to it. Okay, so things like I'm going to make the letter C bigger. So what I would do is make a new text layer, which is the same font and obviously the same colour, and then I would resize that individually and then put that next to the other words, just so that I can have more control over the individual adjustment of that particular letter, like you're seeing on screen. Okay, so I can change the size of it, basically, and I'm going to make that, I'll make a box as well, which is going to be the same colour as that's gone across. So there's things like that you can do, okay? But again, I'm still not happy with that text, basically. It still looks too plain for my liking. So if I go into the special effects box down here, okay, I can add layer style to it. So I'm just going to go into any of these kind of blending options, just so you can have a look. Okay, so first of all, I can drop a shadow on that, like a little bit of a shadow, which makes it stand out a lot more from the background. I think that's just nice and subtle, that effect. I like that. I can put a bevel and emboss on that. So again, that's going to stylize it a little bit more. I feel like that's maybe too light a bezel, so I'm going to contour it. I could also give it a little bit of texture. Again, going for that zombie fill, so if I click on the texture option, I've got a metal texture. So now I can apply that same effect to that. What I could also have done is duplicate that and then adjusted the size of it. But as you can see already, my computer is being way too slow, and that's probably a much easier way of doing it. It's just because I've spent so long trying to actually get this to do anything. So that's great. You'll notice there's a slight line there. Okay. You may not notice it, but I have certainly noticed it. And I know there are a lot of lines there because of the nature of the pattern that I've chosen to use. But if you weren't doing something that was so, such a font that was so, I don't know, messy like this one is, you might notice the difference between that. So what I would do with this situation, I'd first of all resize it. Okay, and then I would use something like the smudge tool, which is under this teardrop. And what the smudge tool does is it blends one thing into another, kind of trying to make it as seamless as possible. But the more you smudge, the more your picture is going to go blurry. So you've got to be really careful when you use this tool as to how effective it is. Because if you use it too much, you'll notice it's too blurry, and then therefore you've kind of lost the effect that you were kind of going for. Okay, so that's okay. That's all right. If I scale that back to fit screen, it probably won't look too bad. I mean, it's a little bit noticeable though in my eyes. So what I would then do, zoom back in, and then I would use something called the clone tool. Okay, and what the clone tool does is pretty much what it says in its name. It clones part of the picture. So it looks like this, okay? And what you want to do with the clone tool is you would press Alt and then click on the area, and you get this kind of target. And what that allows you to do is copying that part of the image, which you can then paint, and it will start to make a blend of your image. Do you see that? So it's basically copying what was there and painting it. Okay, this is what Photoshop people use, or professionals use, to get rid of spots. They would clone another part of a model's face and then use it to kind of hide any kind of blemishes or spots and things like that. And that looks a lot better, and I know it does, because when I zoom out in a minute, once it lets me do that, you'll see that it's unnoticeable.